In a quiet suburb where peace and tranquility usually reign, two masked men in black jackets slowly approached one of the most famous banks in the city. They were determined and calm, as if they had been preparing for this moment for many years. One of them, middle-aged, was calm and focused, while his young companion, excited and nervous, constantly looked around. They approached the entrance having previously studied the security and operating hours of the bank's security. They walked calmly through the doors without attracting much attention. One of the robbers quickly approached the reception desk, while the other began to observe the surrounding situation. The bank employees were taken by surprise, but quickly realized that they had better comply with the robbers' demands. They began handing over money and filling bags, following the instructions. Meanwhile, the young robber looked around the room with concern. His gaze fell on the CCTV cameras. He shuddered and quickly turned to his companion. The older robber raised his eyebrows but quickly realized the gravity of the situation. They collected the money and immediately left the bank building, heading towards the back exit. But they did not expect that there would already be a police patrol there, which was called by an alarm from the bank. The situation began to get out of control when they encountered the police. The shootout began. Amid shouting, gunfire, and chaos, the robbers tried to escape the trap they had fallen into. After a shootout with the police, the robbers found themselves in serious trouble. They entered a dead end and were surrounded by law enforcement forces. One of the policemen was wounded, but this could not stop the law enforcement officers in their determination to apprehend the criminals. Sitting in the corner of the building, shielded from enemy fire, the robbers began discussing their options. The eldest of them, with experience and composure, proposed a strategy for escaping through the roof. He knew it was a risky move, but he had hope since the police were focusing mainly on the entrances and exits. The young robber, still under the influence of the shooting and adrenaline, could not think clearly. His decision was more impulsive, to try to break through the police cordon right on the street. He convinced his senior comrade that they had a chance if they acted quickly and decisively. In the end, given the dangers and risks, they decided to take the risk through the roof. Using automatic weapons, they broke through the top of the building, ignoring attempts by the police to stop them. The fire continued on both sides, but the robbers were determined. Once on the roof, they found a helicopter arriving to support the police. This was the decisive moment. The older robber ordered the younger one to prepare a rope so that they could climb down from the roof, despite the risks. Soon they were already in the air, striving for freedom despite the strong opposition of the police. The main robber, named Jake Collins, was an experienced thief and the leader of the group. His partner, young and ambitious, was named Max Carter. They were outside the bounds of the law, but even in this situation, Collins remained calm and professional. After they left the bank's roof and climbed down a rope, they found themselves on the street surrounded by police. The fight turned into a full-blown firefight with both sides opening fire. Collins and Carter fired, trying to create a path through the police cordon, their hearts beating in unison, their adrenaline pumping. Giving orders and coordinating actions, Collins led his team through danger while fighting for their freedom. While Carter, young and inexperienced, rushed forward, trying to conquer all the obstacles in his path. It was at this moment, when it seemed that everything was already lost, Collins noticed a small opening in the police cordon, which could be their salvation. He ordered Carter to cover them while he led the team through this narrow passage. Carter's heart pounded as they broke through the barriers and bullets whizzed around them. But thanks to Collins' determination and tactics, they finally escaped this trap, conquering the obstacles and leaving only dust and chaos in their wake. After a successful but tense bank robbery, Jake Collins and Max Carter retreat to their makeshift hideout to hatch their next ingenious plan. Sitting at the table, they began to discuss possible options for their next robbery. Jake, as usual, showed his coolness and thought about every step. He came up with a new idea that could be their key to success. He proposed to rob a large jewelry store, which was located in the very center of the city during the annual jewelry fair. He explained that at this time there would be a large amount of valuables in the store, as well as a huge number of visitors, which would create a great moment for them. Max, inspired by this idea, began to add his own ideas to the plan. He suggested using a disguise and blending in with the crowd of visitors so as not to arouse suspicion. He also put forward a plan to organize a diversion of police attention by setting fire to garbage containers in a remote part of the city. Jake agreed with Max's proposal and completed the plan with details of weapons, communications, and an escape route. They decided that they would need an additional team for this heist, but they would need to be more careful in selecting allies to avoid information leaks. Ultimately, they developed a detailed and strategic plan that minimized risks and maximized chances of success. They knew they would need good preparation to implement this plan, but they were confident in their abilities and ready for the challenge. Their next move would determine their fate, and they were ready for this challenge. Realizing that their next step would be critical, Jake and Max began their preparations with determination. They brought on additional team members, carefully selecting each one to minimize the risk of information leaks. Each member of the team was trained and brought up to speed to ensure consistency and coherence during the heist. Jake and Max put a lot of time and energy into training and rehearsals to ensure that every step of their plan would be executed accurately and flawlessly. Approaching the day of the jewelry fair, tension in the team reached its peak. Everyone was determined to succeed, ready to complete the task. The time had come, and they went to the scene, each knowing his role and ready to fulfill it to the end. During the robbery, everything went exactly according to plan. Having disguised themselves and mingled with the crowd, the team quickly and without any problems entered the jewelry store. They acted quickly and professionally, collecting valuable jewelry and diamonds without attracting unnecessary attention. While the team was committing the theft, Max and his assistants successfully organized a diversion of police attention, allowing the robbers to safely leave the crime scene. With a pile of jewels in hand and the police still on the ropes, Jake, Max, and their team ran to their hideout, where they planned to divide their loot and enjoy the success of their brilliant plan. After successfully robbing a jewelry store, Jake and Max, along with their team, became known as one of the most daring and brilliant criminals in American history. Their thefts became legendary, and each new crime caused a wave of interest and anxiety in law enforcement agencies. The criminal empire of Jake and Max continued to expand. They developed and committed new ambitious crimes, attracting the attention of not only the police, but also the public. They became symbols of the modern underworld, their names echoed in terrifying stories of audacity and cunning. However, their success did not go unnoticed. Law enforcement has stepped up efforts to capture Jake and Max, declaring the hunt for them a national priority. Every step they took was the subject of careful observation and analysis. Authorities used all available resources and technology to find and arrest these criminals. But Jake and Max weren't going to give up that easily. They continued to improve their methods and techniques. They were so well prepared that every time the police thought they had finally caught them, they slipped through their hands at the last moment. Thus, the game of cat and mouse continued. They slipped away and then reappeared on the verge of arrest. But even as their reputation as America's biggest criminals grew, they knew it was only a matter of time before they had to answer for their crimes before the law. During one of his daring robberies, Max was shot by law enforcement. In the chaos that followed the shooting, he was captured and arrested, and later sentenced to a lengthy prison term. This unexpected turn of events left him defenseless against a system that had long sought to screw him. While Max was being taken to prison, Jake managed to elude the police by disappearing into the crowd. He was free, but that didn't mean his life was safe. On the contrary, he understood that now he would be hunted even more persistently. Jake disappeared into the shadows, but his mind was filled with plans. He knew that he would have to change his usual methods and carefully plan his next step. He understood that he could no longer count on Max's help, and now he would have to act alone. Armed with the experience and knowledge gained from years of criminal activity, Jake began to develop new plans that would allow him to maintain his freedom and avoid the fate of his partner. He knew that each new robbery would involve risk, but for him, it was a part of the life he had chosen. Thus began a new stage for Jake. He became a loner, but his determination remained unchanged. He knew that the path to freedom would be long and dangerous, but he was willing to go through all the obstacles to return to his criminal empire and perhaps even free his friend Max from prison. After Jake managed to escape the police and start a new life, he began to find himself in an ordinary, normal life. He met a wonderful woman and built a happy family with her. They decided it was time for a child, and soon their son was born. However, Jake's past would not let him go. He could not forget his old friend Max, who was in prison, convicted for their joint crime. 5 years later, when Jake had almost forgotten about his life of crime, he received a letter from Max from prison. Max wrote that he was being held in the most dangerous prison in the country and that he needed help. He knew that Jake was the only one who could help him get out of this situation. This letter became the impetus for Jake to decide to return to the criminal world, at least temporarily, to save his friend. Jake knew that this decision could jeopardize his family and new life, but he felt obligated to help Max. He developed a daring liberation plan that required skill and desperation. Thus, Jake made the decision to temporarily leave his family and return to the world of crime to save his friend. He had to go through many dangers and trials, but he was determined and ready to go to the end to bring his friend back to freedom. Known as Raven's Fortress, this prison is located in the deepest, darkest corner of the country. It is surrounded by high walls, guarded towers, and powerful searchlights, making any attempt to escape almost impossible. But the real danger of Raven Fortress lies in its inhabitants. The most dangerous and violent criminals who have no place in regular prisons are kept here. Bandits, assassins, thugs, they all find their place here. Within the walls of this prison, the law of force reigns, and the weak become victims of ruthless gangs. The guardians at Raven Fortress are known for their cruelty and mercilessness. They have no qualms about taking extreme measures against any prisoner who tries to get out of control. For Max, staying in this prison meant not only physical suffering but also constant fear for his life. He knew that he needed help to get out of this hellish fortress, and his only hope was his old friend Jake. Max had been in Raven Fortress for several years now, and every day was a challenge for him. He had to be always on guard because even the slightest sign of weakness could lead to other prisoners taking advantage of it. He fought for his life and his honor every day, but it was obvious that without outside help, he would not be able to get out of this prison. Max had already begun to lose hope when one day, at the most unexpected moment, news came to him. He received a letter from Jake. In this letter, Jake explained that he was ready to return to the world of crime, at least temporarily, in order to free his friend Max. This news restored Max's hope. He knew that Jake was not making empty promises, and that he would do everything possible to free him from this dungeon. Max began to hope for freedom again, realizing that he had a faithful friend who was ready to take the most desperate steps for his sake. Meanwhile, Jake and his team began preparing for a daring liberation plan. They knew that many dangers and obstacles awaited them, but they were ready to go through everything to return Max to freedom. Their adventure had just begun, but they were determined to see it through to the end. Jake assembled his team of experienced criminals who were willing to take risks to save Max. They spent months studying the prison's layout, its weaknesses, and its security system. They developed a detailed plan, taking into account all possible dangers and obstacles. On the day of the operation, Jake's team broke into the prison using special tools to bypass the guards. They passed through several layers of security, avoiding the guards. However, every step was carefully planned, and the team was prepared for any eventuality. When they reached the cell where Max was being held, they encountered heavy security. But thanks to their skills and composure, the team was able to hack the security system and get inside. They quickly freed Max and headed towards the exit. However, even after Max was freed, the operation was not completed. Jake's team faced stiff opposition from the guards and had to fight for their lives to get out of the prison. They used all their skills and resources to overcome every obstacle in their path. In 1935, New York turned out to be almost a real stronghold of legality. After an ambush in which Jake's entire team was killed, the authorities of the city and the whole country began to investigate this incident. American prosecutors, concerned about the safety and order of the country, persistently searched for some of the most dangerous robbers in history. The streets were filled with police officers, and security was tightened to the limit. Raids and searches were carried out throughout the city, and the newspapers were full of scandalous headlines about serious crime and the hunt for criminals. Jake and Max knew that every step they took would be risky. They hid in the shadows, constantly changing locations and using various means to avoid being caught by the police. New York became a zone of constant tension and danger for them. In the midst of the tensions of New York, Jake and Max are forced to act carefully and shrewdly. Their previous connections and contacts became dangerous, so they had to look for new ways to ensure their safety. They went underground, where they found allies among underground circles, where everyone held on to their own interests. They had to bargain and negotiate, but they were able to find protection and support. During this time, Jake and Max secretly planned their next operation. They knew that every day the prosecutor's office collected more and more evidence against them, and time was working against them. However, their friendship and trust in each other remained their main weapon in this fight. Under the cover of night, they emerged from their hiding place, scouting the locations of banks and jewelry stores, preparing for the next robbery. Their plan was bold and well thought out, and they knew their future depended on it. Jake and Max faced a difficult choice: undertake one of the most dangerous missions of their lives or risk everything to save their loved ones. Jake understood that the mission to rob one of the most guarded banks in New York required maximum preparation and concentration. He decided to take his family out of the city to Switzerland, where they would be safe from possible danger. It was a decision he took with difficulty, but he knew his family's safety was most important. Max, on the other hand, knew that he had little time left to say goodbye to his mother. She was his last hope and support, and he could not afford to lose her. He decided to take a chance and go to her, despite the danger and risk it posed. Jake organized everything necessary for his family's safe move to Switzerland. He made careful plans to ensure their safety and comfort in their new location. Together with their family, they went to the airport, where a flight to Europe was waiting for them. At the same time, Max headed to his mother, who lived on the outskirts of the city. He was willing to do anything to spend his last moments with her, and he knew that their time to say goodbye was limited. Arriving at his mother, Max found her in a weak state. He looked after her carefully, trying to do everything possible to ease her suffering. He told her about his adventures and the decisions he made. The mother listened with pride and excitement, knowing that her son was doing everything he could to help her. Despite the difficult circumstances, Max and his mother spent their last moments together filled with love and understanding. Max was grateful for these precious moments they spent together, and he knew they would remain in his memory for the rest of his life. After saying goodbye to his mother, Max again began to struggle with reality. He was ready to carry out his mission, knowing that not only his freedom was at stake, but also the future of his family and his loved ones. Realizing that time was running out to say goodbye to his loved ones, Max devoted every moment with his mother. He listened to her stories, hugged her, trying to convey his love and support. In her eyes, he saw gratitude and pride for his son, despite all the difficulties and dangers he had to overcome. Meanwhile, Jake carefully organized his family's move. He did everything possible to make sure that they would be safe and would not have any problems when moving to Switzerland. It was important to him to know that his family was safe, even if he himself faced difficult experiences in New York.